Hey everyone, my name is Sarah and this is Sarah in God's Time. Thank you so much for joining me today in this time of devotion. What I would like to start out with today is the purpose for this devotional. So I am wanting to do this podcast so that I can answer your questions. Whenever I was first starting to explore the Bible and who God was, I wasn't attending a church. And so it was hard for me to find answers to those questions that I had as I was reading the Bible. And regardless of whether you are just starting this journey or whether you have been on this journey of discovering who God is your entire life, I hope to be one resource for you that I wish I would have had whenever I was first starting. So I will explain at the end of this little devotional here how it is that you can reach me with your questions. Because that's the whole purpose of this devotional, this time of this podcast, is so that I might be able to receive questions from you and kind of explore what possible answers might be along with you. So, today we are going to be reading from Jeremiah 29:11, and it's a pretty popular verse, and maybe you'll recognize it when I read it. So Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Now, I don't know about you, but I have spent a lot of time in my past planning things. This was such a habit that sometimes I look back now and I wonder if I spent more time planning out my day and my activities for the day or the week or the month, and if I spent more time doing that, planning time, than I actually spent doing the things that I planned. And so just this last year, I have decided to set all of that aside, and now I am living more in the moment, and I'm a little bit more flexible, and it's a wonderful thing. It's wonderful to be able to live in the moment and just experience what it is that God has to offer me moment by moment. And that's the reason why this is called Sarah in God's Time, because I have this new freedom to live in God's time instead of in my own. So, planning. These people here in our reading had some plans of their own. So these are a group of, they're in Jerusalem. They're the people from Jerusalem, and they are following their own plans instead of God's plans. And what ended up happening was, because they were following their plans instead of God's bigger plan for their lives, they ended themselves in exile. They were in a foreign land. They were taken captive by the Babylonian people, and they were taken away from their homeland and taken to Babylon. And they didn't really want to be there. That was not their plan. That's not what they were hoping for whenever they followed their own plans. But God, despite the mess that they found themselves in, God was still speaking to them. And he was still carrying out his bigger, better plan. And he was speaking to the people through Jeremiah, the prophet. And part of God's message was about prosperity, hope, and a future for these people despite the messes that they found themselves in because of their following of their own plans. So God was telling them he was still carrying out his bigger plan, which was to give him all of these great things. But it was going to happen in a little bit different of a way than what the people expected. So the people were hoping that they would be able to have this short time in the foreign land. Now that they're there, they were hopeful that they were going to get out of the foreign land and back to their homeland quickly. And so they were looking for people who would give them the message that they were hoping for. And that actually came through two false prophets, and you can read all about them in this story too. In Jeremiah 29:1, just read the entire section there on Jeremiah 29, and you'll read all about them too. But they were looking for what it was that they were hopeful for, which was for them to return back to their homeland quickly. And they were, I'm sure, very surprised whenever they heard from Jeremiah, who spoke on God's behalf, saying, hey, this is what God says. You're going to be here for a while. And you can read this. Jeremiah 29, 4-7 talks about how God was telling them that they should get comfortable there because that's where they were going to be for a long time, really, is what he was saying. And he was telling them, hey, you need to make sure that you marry, you start families, and you buy houses, and you have children, and you give your children away in marriage so that they can marry and they can have children, because you're going to be here for a while. Now, that can seem like it's a really frustrating place to be, but I wonder if God wasn't telling them this so that they would know what to expect, and so that they could more willingly live in God's timing and in God's will. Because the good news here is, despite the mess that they found themselves in, God was still carrying out his bigger plan. He was making it known, the plan known to his people, and he was still with them, despite the trouble that they found themselves in because of their following of their own plans instead of God's. And I just think that that's a wonderful thing. He never left his people. And that's great news for us too, because he's still with us. Even when we have questions, even whenever it is that we find ourselves in circumstances that we wish we were not in. And even whenever we are maybe hearing things that we would like to hear, we can still trust that God's plan is going to be better than any plan that we have for our own lives. And that's great news. And I hope that you are reminded of God's presence with you through this short devotional. And I say very short for a reason, because this is pretty short. There's so much you could read in this passage. And I hope that you take the time to do that this week too. And then as you have questions, you can send me those questions on my webpage. My webpage is sarahandgodstime.com. And in there you can find there's a place where you can email me your questions, which please do that because I would love to hear your questions. And there's also a place where you can send me your prayer requests. And please send me those too, because I want to be praying for you as you're facing whatever it is that you're facing. I want to be celebrating with you as you are receiving good news too. So one thing that I want to make clear with that is, whenever you send me an email or when you send me a prayer request, you're not signing up for anything else except for me receiving that information and me praying for you and me trying to find some of the answers to the questions that you have. And so you're not going to be signing up to some newsletter, or you're not going to be signing up for me to send you reminders of this podcast that is going to be coming up. It's just so that I can get your questions, so that I can try to explore what answers might be out there, and also so that I can pray for you. And those will be outside of the podcast time. The prayers will be. Also with this, I would like to let you know, I'll be posting these devotionals every Sunday evening at 6:00. You'll be able to find those wherever it is that you get your podcasts. That can be on Spotify or the Apple Podcast. Or you can watch this video devotional on my website at sarahandgodstime.com. And that's all I have for you today. I'm really, really thankful that you've decided to take some time to be here with me. And I look forward to hearing your questions. And I look forward to seeing you next week again at 6:00 on Sunday evening. So have a wonderful day. I hope that you're reminded of God's presence with you throughout this week. And I really look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.